The Barkscrolls, a Chronicle of New Faery. Samhain Dumb Supper, Saturday, Chestnut Moon the 9th, 2019. Lights from the Silver Highway faded into the distance behind them as the land dragon exited the main thoroughfare and wound into silent countryside. Under the cover of night, the pines cast black silhouettes like barbed hooks against the sky, as if they were pulling down a shroud of mist. The pale vapor parted around them as they passed through, closing mutely behind them without a trace of their passing. From behind the wheel, Ion the leprechaun imagined that this might be what space sounded like, or didn't, as the case may be. To anyone that didn't know him, this might seem like an unusual thing for one of the folk to ponder over. It was very science-y. That was his thing, though, science. Rumpelstiltskin had made leprechauns famous for their alchemical abilities, especially where it concerned gold. Ion, however, identified more as the Arthur Weasley of fairy alchemy, which was to say, he was far more interested in the magic of humans. "Turn there," Lolly pointed, at the barely visible log sign which had been carved with the words Summit Grove Lodge. Though it was right off the road, a row of trees and a distinct lack of garish floodlights made their chosen destination feel even more secluded than it already was. When she and Count Morbid had been scouting for a location, Lumina had been true to her nature as a will-o-wisp and guided them to the perfect spot for their Samhain observance. Shadows of the Fae, both seelie and unseelie, could be seen beyond the windows in the wood-framed doors. The Samhain Dumb Supper was one of the most important holidays of the enchanted folk. Not only was it a remembrance feast for those who had passed beyond the veil, but it was also the ceremonial changing of the seats of power between the fairy courts. Inside, the passage between the mundane world and the realm of the underdwellers was separated by curtains of gray and tattered shrouds that hung in the entryway between the Great Hall and the foyer. Baron Hammerhands, Ion, and Princess Lolly each found a bag of favors with their name on it on the greeting table. Inside, amongst other host gifts from Count Morbid, were 3 bones with their names on them. They were bid to drop one into the collection cauldron and then to proceed with passing through the shroud to the other side. Attendees milled about in polite conversation within. Princess Lolly grimaced slightly to herself. She wasn't exactly late, but wasn't exactly on time either. Timeliness and tangliness were the banes of her existence. Some had trouble with filling out forms, others struggled with navigating bus routes. For Lolly, if it could tangle, it would. If it required being on time, expect her at least a half an hour late. Count Morbid manifested in front of her, breaking her internal thoughts. "Princess, I'm so glad you're here." He coughed dryly into a pale hand, the sheen of a cold sweat on his brow. "I don't suppose you could do most of the speaking this evening?" Poor Morbid's voice was more hoarse than usual. "Yes, of course." She gestured to the large tome in her arms. "I just need to set the Book of the Dead on the head table at the ancestor's seat. Are you feeling all right? Where are the king and queen?" She thought his outfit looked fantastic, even if he was a bit under the weather. The dark-dressed Sluagh motioned her ahead. "Oh, well, I have no idea where their majesties are." He waved a hand around his head, kerchief flagging in the air. "You know, this business with the spirits has been very draining on my energy. I'm sure the syrupy healing potions will get me through the night if I don't otherwise die." Black humor, a good sign, she thought, setting the heavy book at the head seat on the table. If he was still making sarcastic jokes while standing up, it probably was mostly all right. Looking out over the room from this vantage point, the turnout was quite good. especially considering the fact that there hadn't been a proper Samhain celebration or changing of the courts since the Old Kingdom fell into hibernation. Now, the New Kingdom was waking from the long winter, with more and more new faces at each gather. As the present and ranking member of the Unseelie Court, Count Morbid took the first seat to the left of the ancestor, and Princess Lolly likewise noticed her name placard to the right. She had been expecting their royal presences, thus, their absence was somewhat concerning. Others present began to follow suit, finding their name cards at the various tables and seating themselves. Just a couple seats to the right, the spy master leaned in a bit to greet her. His hair curled into a fabulous pink-red mohawk style that looked quite good on him. "Is there anything I can do for you this evening?" he asked between sips from his coffee cup, setting it daintily on its saucer with a glance just as saucy. Lolly pursed her lips slyly. "Well, I should like to know who some of these unfamiliar faces are." She up-nodded toward a table where a woman with patches of bark on her skin sat next to a quiet gentleman, and then toward the back of the room where a strange creature hovered, moths swirling round his head, obscuring his features. Them, for example. And who is he there in the back of the room? I don't know any of them. Yes. Ember's gaze followed hers subtly, befitting any master of the information trade. I'll see what I can learn. Tell me what it would take to steal you away from the king. Lolly locked eyes with the spy master for only a moment. Not much, probably. Lady Ashlanera flashed a smile bright as her golden wings from over his shoulder. The trio laughed. I just wanted to say hello before everything got started. How have things been in your barony? It was a many-layered question to the Queen of Dragonflies. Oh, fine, I suppose. Uneventful. Has anything happened since Baroness Patience renamed it? Lolly's eyes drifted over the tables on the floor, taking silent note of a wood elf she did not recognize with Flinisippi, their resident Powry. I see that she's not here. No, not really. These words were measured, but they were also true. Inexplicably, the most motivated creature in the barony of Kismet Vale, where Lady Ashlanera lived, seemed to be Professor Culpepper, a mere mortal. Odd, considering it was here that Sir Kieran, the game master, and his squire also resided. Have you given any thought to organizing Shenanigans? Ashlanera sighed, and Lolly understood this to mean, not yes. She tried to gauge the lady's response, but such things were never her forte. It hadn't been a no, but clearly something was preventing her from becoming more proactive in the lands. Time? Energy? Conflict? Before she had a chance to ruminate on it further, Count Morbid flagged her attention. Your Highness, are you ready to begin? Lolly nodded. We'll talk later, Lady Ash said, and quietly withdrew to her seat. Pushing a single-note chime across the table in the sickly Slua's direction, the princess rose from her seat, raised a water glass, and tapped it with her spoon. Good evening, she began. Although he is your host, tonight I will be speaking the Count of Count Morbid, since all this activity with the ghosts has taken a toll on his health and voice. He raised his glass of lemon water toward her, appropriately tart for one of the underdwellers. Thank you all for joining us for our first annual Samhain Dumb Supper. This Feast of the Dead serves two purposes: remembrance of the dearly departed, and our traditional changing of the seats of power between the Seelie and Unseelie courts. As part of our observances this evening, we will begin by eating a small meal, followed by a dance, and then a ceremony of remembrance. For those of you who have never partaken in a dumb supper, it is a meal that is eaten partially in complete silence. We will begin when Count Morbid rings the bell like this. She waved a finger in his direction, and he tapped the bell. After he rings it a second time, we may all speak again. During this time of silence, please focus on the taste of your food, savor your drinks, for the invited souls of the ancestors are with us here and tasting vicariously through you during this time when the veil between worlds is thin. Afterward, you're invited to come write the names of your beloved departed in the Book of the Dead for our remembrance ceremony. This can be friends, family, pets, the victims of tragedy somewhere, whomever you think needs remembering. Taking her seat, she saw Baron Hammerhands had manifested a plate of caprese, apple turnovers, crackers, and other hors d'oeuvres while she had been chatting. A good thing. It might have otherwise been embarrassing to be the only person without anything to eat. Once situated, she gestured to the unseelie half of the table. Count Morbid? With a goodly tap, the chime resounded through the hall with an uncanny resonance given its small size. Only the sounds of clicking silverware, rustling napkins, and the faint sipping of drinks could be heard. Not even the whisper of a voice dared break the silence of the supper, but there, off to the Count's end of the table, stood the moth-headed man, back to the wall. The timeline of silent minutes stretched like silly putty, seeming to go on for much longer than it really was. A chime filled the room a second time, and they were all free to now wag their tongues once more. I don't like moth-headed man. Baron Hammerhands leaned over. His voice rumbled like the churning of rocks. Gunther's fancy silver and purple vest shimmered beneath his suit jacket in the low lighting. Why didn't he participate? I don't know, she murmured. Together they watched. It was a marvel that the moths which swirled around the man's head simply stayed with him as he moved, as if his head were some sort of energy source. Moth-headed man, for that was his unofficial name at this point, left off from being a wallflower and began to circulate around the room, engaging people in conversation as they began to open their gift bags and inspect what was in them. Count Morbid, who is the moth-headed man? Morbid guffawed. What? I have no idea. I thought he was someone you knew. He isn't. Oh, well, I really don't know then. He skewered a tomato with a tiny plastic sword and put it in his mouth, thoroughly unconcerned. Whether that laissez-faire attitude was cold medicine induced or not was anyone's guess. I just hope they're able to reassemble the pieces of my mirror. I haven't been able to speak with the ghost since Poppy's little monster broke it. The enormous troll looked over Lolly's head at the Count. So, you put the shards into everyone's gift bags? What? I figured they would have fun puzzling it out, and it would save me the trouble of having to do it myself. He didn't need to look at them to feel Lolly rolling her eyes. Morbid was an expert-level delegator of anything that resembled work. On a different note, Your Highness, do I have the power to knight people? Her pink brow arched. Well, we are in your duchy. If you want to make a knight here, you can. Good, good. As if on cue, Morbid vanished from his seat only to have his company replaced by the appearance of a moth-headed man. Good evening, Your Highness. He extended his arms in a sweeping bow. Gunther shivered. I'm out of here. Grumbling about being creeped out, he took his leave to mingle with the others. The sound generated by the papery wings of moths that fluttered around the strange being's head would cause chills to streak up anyone's spine. And you are? Lolly squinted, but the constant dusting of moth wings around his, or rather, its, head obscured any hope of making out a face. It seemed like a man, though, with his old-fashioned walking stick and tan slacks. Oh, no one of importance. He waved a hand about as if to blow off his own introduction, and then stepped in closer. I don't suppose you have any ghosts. I'm trying to help them. That wasn't suspicious at all, she thought. I have one. Why should I give it to you instead of Count Morbid? Well, he's the one that lost them in the first place. I'm just trying to help them find peace. Her blood-red lips pursed. The Count is offering a reward of dross for the ghosts we return to him. What are you offering? What do you want? Mothman spun his stave in his hand, studying the orb grip affectatiously at eye level. Is he new? Lolly wondered, her eyes flashing over his personage with quick surmise. How about that box there under your arm? I'm afraid I can't give you that. He patted it affectionately. Show me what's in it then. I can't do that either. It's only for me to know. Well, you certainly aren't making this easy. Her glittery, manicured nails made a rat-a-tat-tat sound on the table. Fine, that ring on your finger. Moths flurried in agitation. That is very valuable to me. Lolly stared at him expectantly. They both knew that he had made a mistake in asking her what she wanted so open-endedly, and now he had turned down the first two requests. His bargaining was at an end. All right then, I shall give the ghost to the Count. No, I'll take it. Quicker than Crisco, the ring slipped off his finger and into her palm, weighty as she held it up to the light to better see the large blue topaz stone. She grinned and without a word opened her pouch and transferred the stone to which her ghost's essence was bound over to the Mothman. Rising from her seat, she tucked the large silver ring into the folds of her corset. Mothman took his cue with a quick bow and dismissed himself to continue hustling the guests for their ghosts.
Hello friends, this is Gun for Hammerhands. Thank you for checking out Fairy Princess Lolly's channel. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe button. Use your troll hammer to ring that little bell icon to get notifications when she posts future videos. And if you'd like to support these magical creations, fly over to our Patreon and join the Fairy family. Safe travels!